A group of state employees recently testified in federal court, I'm going to come back to that, federal court, that their supervisors in the Human Services Department asked them to falsify applications for food stamp benefits. The employees allege this was done to reduce the number of people who would qualify for expedited assistance, which must be provided within 7 days by law for people with certain levels of income. New Mexico is not meeting federal requirements for processing those applications, and New Mexico's Center for Law and Poverty is requesting that the feds put an independent monitor in place to oversee some functions in HSD, including, of course, the Food Assistance Program. And our line panelists are ready to discuss this ongoing case. I'm joined at the table this week by Dan Foley, former New Mexico House Minority Whip. Merritt Allen is back. She's from Vox Optima LLC, I believe. Isn't it the full title? Optima LLC, right. Laura Sanchez-Rivea is back, an attorney with Cuddy McCarthy LLP. There it is. And Sophie Martin, an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Sophie, stay right there. Sure. Officials are saying, HSD officials saying supervisors don't do what's being alleged, and the employees kind of got this wrong in the paperwork. Now, I'm going to say federal court again because these folks were testifying in front of a U.S. magistrate judge under oath. Under oath. And I would have to think these folks would have their act sort of tight to be able to do that and not just have a clerical error. My expectation would be that their allegations would have been pretty thoroughly tested by the legal team that's bringing that case, that there wasn't a whole lot of uncertainty in what they were talking about. It is a serious matter, and I think one of the things that you've touched on in your intro is really important. It's not that these employees are looking, it's not a civil case, right? This is a situation in which what's being asked for is a monitor for HSD. And when we think about, not even necessarily the merits of the case, whether we believe these allegations or not, HSD is not in a great place in terms of public perception. This is not the only reason that folks have called for a monitor for HSD. And you know, in the New Mexican, Santa Fe New Mexican, I think it was yesterday, day before, a piece about how Easter Seals and HSD are in a big battle over money that HSD wants from Easter Seals. It brings us back to that whole behavioral health issue. This has been a really tough couple of years for that department. That's right. And this just doesn't help. That's right. By the way, Easter Seals, I've got the full name of the organization. Thank you. It's important to get that out there. Laura Sanchez-Rivea, you know, interestingly, again, we have a situation where we have allegations, and people have the right to push back on allegations. No problem there. The feds are going to have to figure this out. But I want to get to Sophie's point about a federal receivership or a federal monitor. The HSD folks say this would be a bad way to go because it would upset the system too much, end up costing the taxpayer more money. Services would be rendered a little bit less effective. Are you buying that? No. Because my history of looking at federal receivership is things tend to get better quickly. Well, I'm not surprised that they're pushing back against that and that they're coming up with arguments, because having a federal receivership means that basically you have no control over what's happening. Somebody else is monitoring everything that you're doing. Right. You know, the feds are basically in your business, making sure everything's working right. And usually what does happen is things improve. You get some, you know, better processes that come out of it. The system tends to improve. And I think this is a situation that definitely begs for that kind of oversight at this point. I mean, some of the allegations are really egregious. They were being told, some of these employees were being told by supervisors to add assets to applications. I mean, if you think about what that means, there were people who were basically asking for an expedited review of their case for food stamps, and expedited means 7 days. So these were people that were clearly at their wits' end in terms of their finances. They were desperately in need of food stamps. And then what people were doing, what these employees, some of them were being told to do, was to add assets to the applications, which would essentially take them out of that expedited process and take a longer review. And for no reason other than to, you know, in some cases it looks like it might have been because they were trying to clear out a backlog of a lot of these, and they were going to have some visits that they were trying to prepare for. And so just in terms of a method to try to address some of the problems within, you know, their just backlogs and other issues, I mean, this is a terrible way to proceed. And I just find it really egregious, and I can't imagine a situation that wouldn't be more appropriate for a receivership kind of situation. I think it's interesting, if I can just add, because, you know, hearing your description of some of the allegations, going back even further, one of the problems that HSD, one of the things it was doing was it had a system in which it automatically denied claims.
regardless of what data was put in, automatically denied, and then there had to be some sort of override in order for you to get your 7-day claim. These are the most vulnerable people in our society. Your assets have to be down to almost nothing. You, as Laura said, you have to be desperate. And these are not people who have the resources to force HSD to do its job. So Center on Law and Poverty, this is really, you know, important work that they're doing. But what makes it especially egregious, if these allegations are correct, is that HSD, the very population it's supposed to be serving, taking advantage of people who have almost no way of fighting back.
That's right, Merritt. When you think about adding assets, we're talking about $400 in some cases, puts these folks over the edge from getting food in 7 days, as Laura's talking about, to over 30 days. That's the part that hurts your heart. And it really, you know, if it's a systems problem, I haven't heard anything from HSD, and I'm wondering if everyone at the table has heard anything. How do we fix this? It just seems to me the receivership is the only way to go, because this has been going on for some amount of years now, in some amount of suits, as a matter of fact. So,
I'd like to point out, regardless of what you think about public assistance, hunger is a real problem.
Thank you.
In New Mexico. I've had the honor of being able to work with both St. Felix Pantry in Rio Rancho and the Storehouse in Albuquerque. St. Felix Pantry feeds 1,000 families a week.
Wow.
In Rio Rancho. We don't usually think of that as a depressed.
That's right.
Storehouse served 2.8 million meals last year.
I believe it. Yep.
That's outside of the public assistance program. And this reminds me of the situation the VA is going through, a very similar thing where bureaucrats, or I don't mean to put that label on, but government employees who didn't want to change their operations to make them more streamlined, instead fudged paperwork to cover up why they weren't providing federally mandated benefits.
Right.
Hugely problematic. And whether it's a veteran or it's a hungry family, it's equally inappropriate.
That's right. Daniel, you know, again, we've got a situation where someone, Laura mentioned this kind of in passing, but they were going to have some visits. Some visitors were coming, and that would be the federal government, checking up if they're in fact doing what they're supposed to do with the 7-day limit. And this is why they're not doing it. So it seems to me, if you have to back all the way up and reboot this whole system, is that the right way to go for you? Are we at that point?
Yeah, no,
for you, has enough been proven?
Obviously what they've done is wrong. There's no doubt about it. You also got to say, when you read some of the articles, the Nuremberg defense is not going to be, you know, applicable. You know, the employees seem to be saying, someone came in and told me I should do this, so I did this.
Right.
You know, and it's wrong. I don't doubt that at some point people have been directing them, but there's also going to be a step back to look at, are some of these folks that are complaining, were they kind of on a list because they weren't processing stuff fast enough, and they did some things that potentially caused them to get in trouble, that now this is the response, well, we were told to do this. It still doesn't matter to me who tells you, right? You still have to know the difference between right and wrong. You have to have the gift of discernment. And if you
on that point though, does it count that these people came forward to you? Does that make a difference?
Well, it does.
As opposed to being exposed to like a press article.
Well, but it depends on, and I haven't read enough to know how they came forward, right? Is it just, you know, were some of these people in the process of being reprimanded for other actions? Was there actions being taken against them for other things that they said this is a problem? Who knows what caused this to happen? I'm glad that it's out there, because if this is a policy, I don't care if it's a policy from the secretary down, the governor down, the secretary down, the regional manager, or just the office manager. This is not the way the system works. And you're correct. These are the most vulnerable people, and going in and telling someone that we've added, it doesn't have to be $400, Gene, it could be $50. And now you're going to wait an additional 20 to 30 days to get food because, you know, someone decided that, well, we think you got more than $200 in your checking account, is unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable.
And on federal receivership, if I can interject, my view is this isn't a state program. This is a federal program administered by state employees. It's federal money. So I think federal receivership, federal government is absolutely within their rights to come in and fix our program, because apparently it appears that from the allegations we are not competent to administer it.
There's no doubt we're not competent. I'm just not sure the federal government's competent. I mean, I'm not sure what they do, any form of the government is doing that's very competent.
But they're within their rights. It may not be a great outcome, but it's certainly appropriate.
We've had this problem, though, Laura, with SNAP benefits and other things. It's been going on for a while. How come we can't get our arms around the idea of just getting vulnerable people some food? Do you know what I mean? Something seems really amiss here.
Well, what's interesting is in this particular case, I mean, the reason there's people testifying in a federal case is because this is actually a case from 25 years ago.
That's right.
So they've just sort of reopened this issue. And 25 years ago, the issue, which obviously continues to be, that they were not administering the program appropriately. So this is something that's just been reopened and is now facing a receivership situation. So, I mean, obviously there's deep systemic problems here. The incentives are not there to make sure people are doing things correctly.
Is part of that the funding for the
I wondered about that.
Yeah.
When I read it, it seemed to me like we've, as a state, we have starved so many of our state functions, so many of our state departments, that
Except education.
When you hear the tremendous hear about the tremendous backlog, it's not necessarily that you just throw money at that sort of thing, but that's a phenomenal backlog.
I agree.
And my sense is that if they had appropriate staffing levels, appropriate training, they could have taken a bit of a bite out of that.
It begs a bigger question, though, which we've talked about this table, and I'll be the one that says it, and I'm sure we'll get emails about it. It's this whole patronage system we have in New Mexico. I mean, we're hiring, these entities, when you get to the street level, there's a lot of people that are out there that want a job, that are doing a good job. There's also a lot of these places where, cousins and friends and, girlfriends and kids of people in power say, well, go make them work, go put them in this department, go put them in that department. And, it just kind of permeates. It just, I don't think people realize that when you take that bad apple and stick them in this department, and then other people start realizing, well, there's no accountability for that person, there can't be any accountability for me.
That's right.
And I think it's just a problem we have in New Mexico when it comes to hiring folks in state government. We don't seem to be attracting the best and the brightest to these jobs.
There you go. When we come back to the line, we'll discuss a new report on the levels of trauma experienced by young people here in New Mexico.